Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spettin, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we have a lot to get into this week as we're going to highlight the breakout players over the first 2 months of the minor league season. On this episode, we're going to focus on hitters. And in our episode later on this week, we're going to discuss pitchers. Before we get into our breakouts, though, there are some news items at the beginning of the week that we want to get into, including the beginning of the Dominican Summer League season and some promotions that were reported on late Sunday night as Trey Gibson will make the jump from High A Aberdeen to Double A Chesapeake, while Sebastian Gongora will go from Delmarva's rotation up to Aberdeen, and Jeremiah Jackson, an infielder with Chesapeake, will make the jump up to Norfolk. Jackson has been one of the steadier presences in a Bay Sox lineup that has been hit by a lot of injuries and some inconsistent play over the first couple months of the year. The 25-year-old was signed by the Orioles over the offseason as a minor league free agent after spending 2024 in the Mets organization. The big story here, though, is the promotions of Gibson and Gongora, continuing a recent wave of pitcher promotions we've seen over the last month or so in the minor league system. And I'll start with Gibson because we have kind of been talking about this possibility for a while, which is that Gibson is going to move up and that the performance in Aberdeen has been better than what the back of the baseball card stats suggests. And to get into a little bit of those numbers now, yes, Gibson leaves Aberdeen with a 5.12 ERA over 38 and 2/3 innings pitched, but that comes to the 2.34 xFIP, 3.87 FIP, and then 67 strikeouts that are tied with Braxton Bragg for the organization lead. So following on the heels of Bragg and Nestor Herman, Gibson makes a jump up to Double A. Bob, I'll start with you here. What are your thoughts on this move?
It was inevitable. It's nice, though, that we're finally getting all of our, the guys we've been talking about, hyping up, and other outlets as well. I know Kylie McDaniel just updated his top 10, had him 4 preseason, 5 now. Trey Gibson, that is. But it's nice to see these guys like Nestor Herman, Braxton Bragg, who wasn't even on that list before the season started, but he quickly put himself there. Levi Wells, a lot of big arms in Double A, and then who knows, maybe some of them get to AAA before the season is out. And as Vic says in the chat, the 2023 arms class will be legendary. I tend to agree there. Excited for Gibson. Excited for us to be able to watch him in Double A because, my goodness, was he fantastic his last 3 starts. 30 strikeouts to only 2 walks. Yeah, the home run fly ball ratio is astronomically high, which is why he has like a 5 ERA, but that's not sustainable there, and it's really not a concern for me right now. I mean, he does tend to live high in the zone with his breaking stuff. Maybe that could give him a little bit higher home run to fly ball rate, but not like 25, 30%. Overall, 67 strikeouts in 38.2 innings. He's just been dominant, and more power to him. We just need Michael Ferret and Zach Fruit to get back, and then, with the quick bump up to Double A for Ferret, then we're really cooking.
Yeah, to kind of keep it brief, just because we are going to dive into all these guys a little bit more later on, but it's a great sign for Gongora for a couple different reasons. But with Gibson, like, he probably should have started the year in Double A, to be honest. I don't think people understand how good the stuff is and how quickly he established himself as a premier prospect in this system. Like, he doesn't pitch in 2023 for non-injury reasons. Comes out last year, his first full year of pro ball, first full year pitching since 2022. He gets up to 92 innings, puts up huge numbers across 2 levels, and the numbers are even more eye-popping this year. We'll pull up some more when we talk about him later on, but yeah, like you mentioned, last 3 outings, 14 innings, 30 strikeouts, 2 walks. Like, that's insane what he's doing. So yeah, it's like he had a 30-something% strikeout rate last year. It's over 40% so far this year, and I don't give a damn what his ERA is because the stuff is phenomenal, and the kid knows how to pitch. This is quite the find by this organization, as we've said many times. Excited for him to take the next test, though, see how he does in Double A.
As you mentioned, Nick, we're going to get more into Gongora and Gibson later on this week, but I did want to mention this with Gongora. It's a very similar story as with Gibson, where you see the 4.43 ERA, but the peripherals are much better. 3.22 FIP, 3.28 xFIP. He struck out 34 batters in 22 1/3 innings pitched at Delmarva and posted a 7.8% ground ball rate. This is a pitcher that we had heard a little bit of buzz about coming into the year, but he really delivered for the Shorebirds.
Yeah, I think for me, this is an amazing sign that he gets promoted. One, because he just left one of his recent starts after like an inning, and of course, my mind goes straight to here we go, another Tommy John case. I purposely did not reach out to someone who I know would have been able to give me an answer immediately on what the injury was, and I purposely did not reach out because I didn't want to know the answer. And then he pops up his next time through the rotation. I don't even think he got pushed back a day or not, but either way, he shows up his next turn through the rotation, pitches very well, and then gets promoted. So yeah, it was a slow start for Gongora, but I think he's kind of been meticulously built up kind of slowly. And I think that goes back to the offseason when they were kind of building that velo back up that he had lost in when he was at Louisville. But yeah, the outings have gotten longer. The walk issue that he had in those first two outings have disappeared, trashed those first two outings completely. Fully healthy. Stuff is back to, I think the organization thinks the stuff is where they want it after drafting him. And so now, yeah, he gets the bump up to high A. And again, I got more fantastic numbers for Gongora if you look under the hood a little bit more. And his last month's worth of outings in particular, guy was one of the most dominant arms in low A so far this year.
Yeah, just the stuff alone, even with the first two starts, just throw them away. But the stuff, you can see it, the changeup is ridiculous. Matched with the mid 90s fastball from the left side that can touch upper 90s. If you throw away his first two starts, it goes from a 4.43 ERA to a 2.29 ERA, and that's with the 2.65 FIP. Striking out almost 40%, walking around 10. So pure dominance. Ever since, if you throw away the first two starts, batters are hitting 145 against him, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, you love to see it. And Vivek said 2023 class for pitchers is going to be legendary, but 2024 so far, the guys that have been on the mound, healthy and on the mound, outside of struggles from Chase Alsop, have been pretty darn encouraging as well. And Gongora is a big part of that.
Absolutely. We'll move on now to the beginning of the Dominican Summer League, which got underway on Monday. As they have for the last several years, the Orioles fielding two affiliates in the DSL this year, DSL Orioles Black and DSL Orioles Orange, and two wildly different results on the field on Monday. Orioles Orange dropped their contest by a final of 20-2 against the Guardians, but DSL Black started off with a win, defeating the Brewers by a final of 3-2, or one of the Brewers affiliates, I should say. And we'll talk a little bit about the results from those games, which, Nick, I know you shared some stuff over at X that stood out to you, and some of the prospects that we're going to have our eye on is what we'll talk about tonight. But Nick, just starting with you, what are your first thoughts on these DSL squads?
I'm glad that whoever was it, Black, that won. I'm glad that was the game that was streamed and not the 20-2 loss. Even though I think Orange technically might have the better prospects on the team, but either way, I think that's what they did last year as well. That was a playoff team, but yeah, the rosters, going through these rosters, we're not going to do a super deep dive here, but it is shocking how many 16-year-olds there are on between both of these rosters. And it's like if you were to make a list of the top 10 prospects in the Dominican Summer League, as far as just Orioles players are concerned, I think probably like 6 or 7 of them are 16 years old. And a lot of them won't turn 17 until after the DSL season. One of those is Jose Pena, the top signee from this year's class. 16-year-old kid he got an opposite field double. I don't think it was hit particularly hard, but opposite field double, also drew a walk. Emilio Sanchez was in that game as well, played third base. He was credited with an error. I think it was kind of a BS call. Didn't even get the home cooking on that. It was an extremely tough play, but made a fantastic diving play all the way across his body. He had... my notes just went blank there. I think had a double as well, an opposite field double. And I think he picked up a walk as well. I don't know. Both guys really stood out in their first games there. But yeah, it was a lot of fun just to see a couple of debuts for some younger arms, some guys who just signed. They weren't even part of the 2025 main international signing class. Yeah, good to see some velos. Good to see some exit velo data. The camera view is a little bit better, a little bit closer to the field. So yeah, it's every game's not going to be. It was a game, right? There wasn't a ton of errors like the other one was. 9-10 total errors. Pitching not that great. That's what you're going to see in the Dominican Summer League. But put it on YouTube, put it on 2x speed. You see all the data right there on the screen. It's kind of entertaining to kind of get you through the early afternoon on the weekday.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was unable to watch. But when I looked at the box score and saw it was 20 to whatever, I was like, "Oh no, please don't be Kelvin Zapata who started and is getting all this recognition on Baseball America as a hard-throwing left-handed pitcher." And no, none of the big recent pitcher signings were in that game, luckily. So that was good to see. But just it's crazy. I know we were in the international game before last year, but it feels like we're really in it over the last couple of years because there's 2 loaded teams here with at least we don't know how loaded they are as far as talent and how good they're going to be, but just as far as interesting names to follow, because with 2 full games from 2 different teams from the Orioles side of things, you still didn't get Frandy Guillen in the game, Jorge Drullard, Fabian Cordero, who's the sleeper watch on Baseball America, and none of the big pitcher signings didn't pitch in these games. So plenty of guys to follow between guys repeating the DSL because, again, last year there was a bunch of 16, early 17-year-olds too, like Emilio Sanchez and Jamon Noel. That's another one. There's plenty others as well. But, yeah, it's just the DSL teams are young. So when you see guys repeating, it's not even necessarily that – they didn't advance. It's just there's still so much to learn at their young ages where they're at, but it's just been a ton of fun. I'm glad now that we're fully cooking here with the Orioles rosters and there's seven games a day now, as long as there's no rainouts, which there's been so many of. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun just today, getting to look at these names in the box score. I feel like when we do our international signing breaking news podcast in January, it's like, oh cool, look, here's these names, here's what they can do, but then they kind of disappear, and to me at least they don't even feel real until you start seeing these box scores and seeing them actually playing. Not even, well, I guess you could see, it's kind of crazy that you could get more content from the DSL than the FCL, but you can watch these guys play. But even just having them show up in box scores makes it all the more real, and we start to develop our feelings and thoughts on these guys. And is it just me, or does FCL only play 7-inning games and DSL plays 9 innings? That's also kind of weird to me, but I digress.
Yeah, Bob, I'm glad you brought up the point about Sanchez and Noel, because those are 2 guys that might have had at least borderline cases for promotion to the FCL. You look at their numbers from last year, and it's a bit of a mixed bag, but they're both really young. Sanchez just turned 18. Noel is young as well. So having these guys repeat in the Dominican Summer League, and there's a hitter that we're going to talk about a little bit later on who's repeated the lower levels a few times, and that's working out for him very well right now at Delmarva. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to see an 18-year-old back in the Dominican Summer League for a second year, because there are some things these guys can still improve on, but I think it's going to make them that much better when the opportunity does come up for them to get to the FCL. And not to mention, as something we've highlighted before, this FCL team is actually kind of stacked. So you got to let that logjam clear a little bit.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch more of these guys just because I had to pull up the old spreadsheet from the 2025, that episode we did after they first signed, and the top pitcher that I was excited to watch apparently just hit the 60-day IL. So you talk about these guys not being real from the time we record that show until the season starts. Well, he's not going to be real for like another year. Benjamin Vasquez, who was like 17 years old and throwing 96 miles per hour, signed for a couple $100K, I think. But yeah, just some names that are really standing out to me, just real quickly on the hitting side. Like you talk about catchers, since we love the catching prospects in this organization. We're going to talk about more later tonight, but Yason Acosta, the 17-year-old switch hitter, had a $300,000 deal with the Mets, but the Orioles said, here's $375,000. And he said, I'm an Oriole. Apparently he has massive raw power and is like super athletic. Probably won't stick behind the plate, actually, at least according to Ben Badler, but this kid's got big time raw power. We like our catching prospects that flip from New York organizations to come to Baltimore. And then a lot of Cuban prospects too. A lot of 16-year-olds and a lot of Cuban prospects on this DSL rosters. Michael Barro, signed for $500K. He is a right-handed power hitter, and the scouting report that I had on him was he was one of the top Cuban players in last year's class, plus runner. He was one of the top 100 in signing bonus in last year overall as well. But he was like a standout on the 16U Cuban national team. So a couple of bats that I'm really interested in. And the arm, Esteban Luna. And when I was going back through, I forgot all about this because I was like, Esteban Luna. All right, what do I have on him? Venezuelan arm, just under 6 feet tall. He made 11 starts last year in the DSL. So he's repeating, but he's super young. 42 innings, a 1.7 ERA, 41 strikeouts. He did walk 22 guys, but had a 166 average against. Young kid. I don't care about the walks in your first year of the Dominican Summer League. Year 2 will tell you a lot more. We know the stuff is legitimately nasty, though, thanks to Josh Norris over at Baseball America. It's like, that's where I remember it from. He had like a 2-minute montage of pitches over on Twitter that you can look up. And according to Josh Norris, who watched him in I think it was the Dominican Summer League All-Star game last year, but feel for multiple breaking balls. Or Norris was at the Dominican Summer League All-Star game and then went over to Orioles camp and got more footage and more information of just Orioles prospects. But feel for multiple breaking balls that, quote, weren't overly sharp or biting, but general shape was there. Clearly felt comfortable throwing them. Good foundation. Fastball is 89 to 92 with 20 inches of induced vertical break. And in the video, you could see the fastball kind of explode to the top, through the top of the zone there. I'm anxious to see if he's a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. How hard is he throwing this year? Is he up to, 93, 94 this year? Yeah, it's Esteban Luna, Esteban Mejia. If you hear the name Esteban in the Orioles system, just know the stuff is nasty. I'm excited to watch both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll, of course, have more on the DSL throughout the season. I think now we'll get into our main topic for tonight, which is breakouts over the first 2 months of the minor league season. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to cover pitchers later on this week. So tonight, we're going to focus on hitters. And each of us picked one hitter that we're going to highlight. And I'm going to start with Nick here because if you knew who Nick was going to pick, you would say, well, we talked about this guy before. Hasn't his breakout already come? But Nick put in the show notes, the real breakout has arrived. And I think I know the reason why Nick is going to state this. But Nick, go ahead and let our listeners know who your breakout player is for the first 2 months of the year.
I'm going with Creed Willems because, like you said, I do think this is the real breakout where you can kind of, a lot of the questions of, okay, can he do this? Can he do that? Like, we want to bump him up the prospect list a little bit, but is he worthy enough? I think he's answered all those questions now at this point this year. We know the typical pattern that Creed has shown throughout his career. He gets to a level, the numbers aren't great. You look back when he got to low A and then high A, he had in his first stints, WRC plus were in the 60s, strikeout rates pushing like almost 30%. But those struggles were always followed by coming back the next season and performing much better. Last year when he started in high A, he's doing his thing again, but the strikeout rate was still like 27%, or the strikeout rate coming into last year was 27% for his career. He dropped that to 21%, which is a great sign. Gets 16 games into Double A to close out the year at the age of 21. League average in a small sample, but like that was maybe the sign that his first step, he gets to Double A, and his first step wasn't the WRC plus going back down into the 60s, the strikeout rate going back to 30%. It was league average in a small sample. He turns 22 this week, actually, so still very young for the level, nearly 2 years younger than the average AA player, and he's hitting 270. He's got 7 home runs. He's got a 10% walk rate, the OPS in year 850, 134 WRC plus, and the strikeout rate is sub 17%, which is insane. Contact rate is good. It's the best of his career by a very healthy margin. And if you remove FCL players and look at all catchers in minor league baseball, sort by qualified hitters, he's 18th in all of minor league baseball in WRC plus, 18th lowest strikeout rate, 15th in OPS. It's a massive season for Creed, and like, it's only June. Oh, it's already June. And so like he's pushing 200 plate appearances in AA as a 21, just about turned 22-year-old. Like, this is for real. This is who he is. I know he's been a fan favorite since he joined the organization, but as far as like the bat goes, it's very good and it's very real. And I feel a lot more confident saying that now.
Yeah, it's the strikeout rate is the thing that's mind blowing to me. Just he already has that power, 20, 25 home run power, I'd say over 162. And then, of course, now he's not striking out at all. He's barely swinging and missing. So still pretty young as a high school draft pick. Needs to be protected in the Rule 5 draft, which is why I think in the past we've said he's a pretty obvious trade chip when we thought the Orioles were going to be good around the deadline. But that's not happening unless there's a huge comeback. Nice sweep of the incredibly talented Chicago White Sox this past weekend. But I wonder, you hold on to him at this point. If he's going to take this big of a leap this year, which it is a big leap, that might be a guy you want to hang on to. And if Adley Rutschman continues to struggle, maybe there's some tough decisions that need to be made at some point. I don't know. I'd still extend Adley tomorrow if I could. But again, it never hurts to have a ton of catching depth and really good catching depth, which the Orioles have in spades. And it'll be very interesting to see how they handle him. But just as far as on the field, yeah, what a remarkable season. It's going very underreported, I feel like, mostly because Sammy Basayo is just annihilating the ball in AAA. But Creed's probably going to be up in AAA with him soon, if not by the end of the year when Basayo eventually makes his major league debut.
Yeah, Nick, I think you bring up a good point, which is that last year Willems managed to avoid that complete fall off after the promotion to AA. That left me hopeful coming into this year that we were going to see improvements. But I would never have predicted that we'd be sitting here in early June, 2 months into the season, and he have a strikeout rate under 17%, and he would still be walking, and he'd still be hitting for power.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, yeah, you thought he'd be okay. Like he'd be fine, maybe. Even if you were a big believer in Willems and what he could do, I think he's taken it to a completely different level this year, which is why I say, like, everyone knows who Creed Willems is. And this is the hard part. When we're like, let's do breakouts, I'm like, all right, let's try to think like people who aren't watching this stuff every single night. Who are the guys that are like, who are the like real breakouts? Because we might look at a guy like, oh, yeah, he broke out last year. We're like, nobody knows about that guy. With Creed, everybody knows about Creed. Everyone loves Creed, but Creed Willems, that is. But yeah, just the bat. It's just, I'm trying to think like it's hard now to, it's only June. We don't have to talk about this right now. We don't have to like even like wrap our minds around trying to figure out how all the puzzle pieces fit together. But yeah, 2 weeks ago, I kind of said, hey, you don't need to protect him in the Rule 5 draft. Keep him in AA for the rest of the year. Like he's not going to stick on the major league roster. But now you're like, I don't know. If you get him up in AAA in the next couple of weeks, or even he could spend 2 months in AAA to close out the year, and he's holding his own, I think that might warrant a spot for him up on the 40-man roster this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that happening. Now I'll go over to Bob here because Bob has a player we've been talking about a little bit more in the last couple of weeks that if you haven't been checking the box scores every day to see what he does, you better start doing it now because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Nate George, I think I shouted him out in one of the recent last segments brought to you by Checker Spot Brewery. But yeah, he's a huge breakout for me. And if you're a patron, top 50 updates coming up after we record these episodes. So let's see how much he's got the helium, because my goodness, we were laughing and joking when he said, or at least it came out that, he sees himself as the next Mike Trout or something like that coming from Manuka. But yeah, he's turning 19 tomorrow, it sounds like, in 2 days at the time that we're recording this. And he should be in Delmarva. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that he's still in there still in the FCL, because I think I saw in Baseball America, or I heard somewhere, sorry, I can't remember where, like that he's had way more contact ability than people expected, shown way more power. He's batting .429 with 1119 OPS, 197 WRC plus, 11% walk rate, 16.4% strikeout rate, an ISO of 190. So everything you want to see: 3 home runs, 11 stolen bases. Yeah, he's been caught stealing 6 times, but hopefully that continues to go up. Contact rate over 75%, swinging strike rate, I had it right the first time, 14%, which is pretty decent for a first time guy that's out of high school, 18 years old. 500 BABIP. Look, that's Kyle Stowers' April territory in the major leagues. But even if that comes down, when he's going to hit in the 300s with all this good stuff too. So, yeah, I think Nate George has firmly established himself as a player to watch in the system.
Yeah, when we brought him up, I think that was last week, and I brought up a lot of that too. Like the numbers are fantastic, but you look at his contact rate, you look at the swinging strike rate, like they're fine, like they're not bad at all. But it was a good baseline for us to have. And all right, if he can improve those and start producing when he gets up to Delmarva, like this kid's gonna skyrocket. But then actually, Eric Longenhagen had a chat over at Fangraphs the other day, and it wasn't about Nate George, but the discussion got to like swinging strike rates and contact numbers on Fangraphs, and Eric said he wants those numbers pulled from the website because they're wrong. Basically, but because of like back end stuff, how it's all set up, whatever stuff that's over my head, they can't. So he basically said kind of ignore those numbers, which I guess does explain a lot, because I know we've talked about guys earlier this season. It's like, well, you look at the contact rate jump, like Ellis Cuevas and some other guys, like contact rate jumped like 25%, 30%. And looking back and like, those are huge jumps. So maybe those numbers are even way better than those numbers that you just routed off, could be even better. And that's why he is performing so well in the FCL this year, which would make sense as well if Kylie McDaniel is going to have him as a top 10 prospect in the system. Now, clearly the under the hood numbers that he's looking at, that he has access to, prove to him that he should be in that spot where he just ranked him at. So I'm even more bullish.
Next Mike Trout for real. I mean, he's got him over Dylan Beavers, who's had a breakout season of his own. So yeah, pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, I was shocked when I saw that. I know that Kylie is usually good for at least one or two bold rankings per top 10, but I was not expecting to see Nate George in there. But we knew going into this year that there was a very good foundation with George because he's such a good athlete. The question was, how long is it going to take him to be able to put everything together? And so far, the answer is that he is just putting it all together from day one. I feel like with him, it's a question of when and not if we see him in Delmarva this year, just based on the way that his season is going and the fact that with the FCL season now running on a different schedule, the Orioles can be a little bit more aggressive with these guys. We saw it with Ellis Cuevas last year, getting some run in Delmarva late in the year. And I have to think the same thing is going to happen for George this season. And he may even beat Cuevas' timeline from last year.
Yeah, kid's 18 years old. And it's like there's some other guys on that FCL roster who are 18, 19 years old, performing equally as well, but they've had a season or two of DSL action or they're repeating the FCL. Nate George just came from, was it some random Minnesota high school?
Manuka.
Yeah, and now look at those numbers that he's putting up. And Kylie McDaniel's got him up there, which that new update as well, just as a tangent, also made me feel a little bit better, talking about how someone like Kylie putting him as high as he did kind of cements what we've been talking about and dreaming on. But then he's also still pretty bullish on Vance Honeycutt as well, which is a promising sign as well. Just side tangent there. But yeah, Nate George, I think he's going to be a guy who you're going to start hearing a ton. He's going to be like the guy in Baseball America, like every other week, there's going to be the Nate George blurb in their articles. And he's going to be going into the offseason. As long as this continues, going into the offseason, he's going to be like the super helium prospect for 2026, I think, on the national level.
At it says, is Nate George a potential top 100 prospect? I'd say yes, not anytime soon. I mean, he's got to continue to have success up the system, but maybe a year from now, if he's in like high A doing damage, then maybe you start thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. And I'll go to my pick now. And I've got Yasmil Bousset as my breakout hitter over the first couple months of this season. Bousset was signed by the Orioles back in 2021 and would spend the next 2 years in the Dominican Summer League. Now, a few minutes ago, you heard us talking about how young the DSL roster is this year and how a lot of the bigger name prospects coming into the season are just 16 years old. That was Bousset back in 2021. 16-year-old appeared in 26 games in the DSL that year, went back to the level the following season, and then spent the next 2 years in the FCL. And generally, up until this year, every Bousset season for the most part was the same. He would get into about 25 to 35 games. He'd have a WRC plus above league average, but he'd have a strikeout rate probably somewhere in the 20s, which is what he had in the FCL the last 2 years. High walk rate, show a little bit of power, but there was nothing really in the stat line that jumped out at you to make you think this guy is going to really come into his own at Delmarva. Goes up to Delmarva this year and is putting together a really, really well-rounded season. So far, through 191 plate appearances, he's hitting 291 with a 163 WRC plus, 4 home runs, a 22.5% strikeout rate with an 18.3% walk rate. And the underlying data has been very good. Good enough, in fact, that he got a shout out from Baseball America last month. BA noted that his max exit velocity at the time was 113.3 miles per hour, and he had a 90th percentile exit velocity of 109.2 miles per hour. So this is someone who hits the ball really hard and is doing it still at a relatively young age at 20 at low A. Defensively, I will be honest that I don't really know what to make of him, whether or not he's going to stick behind the plate. It is worth noting that in the last couple of years, we've seen his workload at first base increase, but you have to consider who his teammates were in the FCL the last 2 years. In 2023, it was Anyudis Mordan that the Orioles had there, and last year was Miguel Rodriguez. So in back-to-back seasons, Bousset had to kind of be part of a tandem of two guys that I think the organization liked and had to divvy up the playing time accordingly. And at least in the case of Rodriguez, I think Rodriguez is probably a little bit ahead of him defensively, but I wouldn't write off Bousset just yet as a catcher. Maybe he ends up as a first base DH type. Who knows? But as we've seen with Creed Willems, the Orioles have an approach that can get these guys better behind the plate. So it's possible that within a couple of years, we're talking about Bousset as the dual threat behind the plate. I will point out that he is Rule 5 eligible, according to Fangraphs, after this season. But given that he's down in low A now, I don't think the Orioles have to worry about that and can really just enjoy what has been a great breakout so far.
I feel like they need to make some adjustments to when these international guys can be Rule 5 eligible. But regardless, yeah, as we talked about in our Delmarva preview, we were all about Yasmil Bousset. This is going to be his. No, we probably didn't even mention him or laughed him off, which goes to show this probably is like the answer for guy who not only is like got on our radar, but like, oh, he's an actual guy. Like I didn't know he could hit the ball 113 miles per hour coming into this season. If I did, I would have talked about him on that preview that we had before the season started. Yeah, it's been very eye-opening. And yeah, I love being part of the international game. Why weren't we? I mean, I'm just getting more and more mad as the years go by that the Orioles just sat out this part of the game, because the fact that they can just, oh, Miguel Rodriguez out for the season with the ankle injury, Anyudis Mordan not living up to the, can't really make contact against high A pitching, but had some good performances. Oh, here's another guy coming up in Yasmil Bousset who can just destroy the ball, and he's still only 20 years old. And behind him, as we'll talk about in a little bit, there's some more catchers coming up behind him in the FCL and the DSL. So, yeah, I love Bousset now. I wish his name was Bobby, because Bobby Boucher would be fun to say on a regular basis. But yeah, I'm loving what I'm seeing from him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's in Aberdeen sooner than later.
Yeah, this is the guy you're talking about, Creed Willems, and like, is this the trade ship? It makes so much sense for Creed to be the guy that you trade for something come from the deadline next year, trade deadline, or maybe even this offseason. But next year, like, this is the guy I think you look at trading, because you can protect him in the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft, no problem. He's in your system for 2026, no worries there. But 2027, like, things are going to look a little different if he continues on this trajectory. So this is the type of guy that you hope continues to pan out and you can use as a trade chip, I think. But I think everything's there. Like, you see the numbers, the walks are good, the strikeouts are good. And in that article, Jeff Ponce, shout out to the GOAT, I wish he still went by Prospect Jesus while writing at Baseball America. But he mentions like it's not all or nothing. It's the end zone whiff rate well above average, the chase rate extremely low at 13%. And quote, his chase numbers are even better when put in context of his 38% swing rate, showing a delta of nearly 25%. Like there's a lot of underlying stuff that looks really, really good there. He can hit the ball hard. He just hits it straight into the ground, like every at bat, it seems like. And so like if that's the flaw, I feel like you can fix the launch angle a lot. Obviously, you can fix that a lot easier than you can getting him to hit the ball harder as he gets older. But and even Jeff notes that he actually does get the ball in the air better when pitchers throw harder at 95 plus. He's actually performs better against high heat. So yeah, he's definitely a dude. And like I said last week, I pretty sure I made jokes about this guy. They're like, this is the best Delmarva's got. All right, here we go. Jokes on me, because holy crap. And he's just getting better and better. He's like the one guy in that Delmarva lineup that's at least consistent. I don't know if he's had like, we talk about Raylan Ramos even about how he's performing well this year, but like his lows have been really low this year. I don't think Boucher has had this like week where it's like, ooh, that was brutal. He's been the most consistent hitter. I know it's just not saying much of that Delmarva lineup, but he's been really consistent down there in low A this year. So I do agree that he could probably move up to Aberdeen this month, probably.
Yeah, in the month of May, he batted .322 with the .992 OPS, 5 doubles, 2 triples, 3 home runs, 2 stolen bases, 20 walks, 186 WRC plus. So pretty fantastic stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out, too, that he's doing all of this at Delmarva, which is a tough place for left-handed hitters especially. So another feather in his cap there. And with that, now we will go into our final segment, Last Call, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located 1421 Ridgely Street. Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink. And with the Orioles out of town this week, head on over there and watch the game, although, of course, it's a West Coast swing. But stop there, pick up some to-go beers, and then head home and watch the game. Now, we'll get into our final segment here, which is our usual outside the top 30 portion of our top 50 shout out. So we look here for players that have good game, good week, or just something interesting in their stat lines that we want to point out. And for this, I will start with Bob.
Okay, yeah. So speaking of catchers in the FCL, you know, we have Adriander Mejia, I believe, there, but also Juan Ortega just coming in hot at 19 years old. He's a young 19 years old, just turned 19 in April, and he's hit his entire Orioles professional career since he signed. Not many at-bats in 2023 in his age 17 season, but 49 plate appearances. He batted .268 with the 116 WRC plus. And then in 2024, in the DSL, repeating the level, he had 131 plate appearances, batted .237 with a 137 WRC plus, 13.7% walk rate, 18.3% strikeout rate, 129 ISO. And then this year gets moved up to the complex for the first time. Didn't play a lot in the beginning of the FCL, whether just from rehabbing guys or just getting worked in slowly. But after 9 games, 29 plate appearances, he's batting .364 with a 1200 OPS, 209 WRC plus, matching 24% walk and strikeout rates, 318 ISO. He's got 2 doubles, a triple, and a home run, 4 stolen bases as a catcher without being caught, matching, again, walks and strikeouts, 7 each. Just a guy to keep your eye out. He's hit his whole way through, and I don't know anything about his defense behind the plate, but could be another guy that either probably next season when we're looking at the opening day rosters for the Delmarva Shorebirds. Let's not laugh off Juan Ortega this time like we did with Yasmel Boucher. And then for my pitcher, I'm going with Adrian Delgado, who another guy who when the rosters were announced, actually, I don't know if he was on the opening day roster, but when I saw his name popping up in the box scores, I'm like, who is this guy? He's walking a lot, which is his big issue. He walks a ton of batters, but clearly the stuff is good because in his last outing, he pitched 2 innings, walked 1, struck out 5. And on the season, he's got a 135 ERA. That's a bit lucky because his FIP and xFIP are all way higher, but just wanted to give him a shout out with a 26% strikeout rate and yes, 20.7% walk rate, but clearly at just turning 20 years old last month, the Orioles like his stuff and think there's something there. So just wanted to give him a little shout.
Like him. I'm gonna stick in the FCL as well. It's kind of slim pickings as far as the hitting's concerned, but DJ Layton, I loved seeing the high school kids start to pick it up a little bit. I know Braylon Whitaker, I think this week went on the IL, but DJ Layton, this FCL lineup gets off to such a roaring hot start. Layton, not so much, but this week he's 40th on our top 50 list, so I didn't cheat this week. He just made the cut here. Again, this week, 3 for 12. There we go. So only a 250 average with a double, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts, 3 for 3 in stolen base attempts, 804 OPS for the week. So, like, not a huge numbers or anything, but expanding it out just a little bit. He's not showing the power yet, but over the last week's worth of games, 7 games, I believe it was, he's got a 145 WRC plus, 476 on base percentage. Compare that to his first 12 games of the year. He had a 40 WRC plus with a 171 average and a 261 on base percentage. So just really good to start to see him maybe settle in a little bit and pick it up. A lot of intrigue, obviously, surrounding him when being a 6th round high school shortstop draft pick. And on the pitching side, I wanted to go with Evan Yates again because he had another really good outing. He's putting up some really good numbers over the last month, but I've already shouted him out once. So I just want to shout out Carter Baumler. Like, we all watched Hunter Harvey become a major leaguer. Baumler, I'm not comparing Baumler to Hunter Harvey stuff-wise, not doing that, but just this, Baumler's fairly highly touted prospect, right? And injuries just have wrecked the career. You take him out of high school ranks in 2020. He has Tommy John surgery, so doesn't pitch in 2021. It's been shoulder issues, like you name it, he's had it. I still remember him making that Delmarva debut, and like I can picture the curveball in my head. I mean, like, oh, I love this Carter Baumler guy. And then he made it 11 innings, and we didn't see him again in 2021. And 2022 he pitched 17 innings. And 2023 he pitched 20 innings. And this year he's already up to 11 innings, and it's only June 2nd right now as we're recording this. So he's almost at a career high already this year, which shows you the unfortunate career path that these injuries have led him down. But yeah, he's got 11 innings this year between the FCL and Aberdeen, most of that at Aberdeen, and he's only allowed 1 run. That's it. 6 walks to 6 strikeouts, not great there, but he had 3 2/3 scoreless innings last week. So yeah, just wanted to shout him out. I feel like we get every couple of weeks, someone will hop in the mentions to be like, where's Carter Baumler? And the answer is usually he's hurt. So just good to see him back on the mound, and I pray he can find some health and career turns into something for him.
Hunter Harvey 2.0.
It's been great to see Baltimore on the mound this season. I'm going to start with my hitter, and that's Kevin Guerrero, who put together a pretty nice week as Delmarva took on Hickory. He had a 5 for 18 run at the plate over 5 games, including a 2 for 4 performance with a home run, or excuse me, a 1 for 4 performance with a home run in Sunday's finale. Nick was talking a moment ago about how Delmarva's lineup, there's been a lot of lows, and when for some of these players, when the lows kick in, they're really low. Guerrero has kind of been one of the outliers so far with Boucher in that he's managed to avoid real dips in his production over the course of the season. Now, one thing that Guerrero does not have going for him so far is that his strikeout rate, especially compared to his walk rate, is pretty high right now. You want to see that number come down at 28.4%, but still, for the fact that he's in Delmarva for his second year, still only 21, good to see him getting off to a good start this season. Then for my pitcher, Kyle Bronovich, after 3 kind of rough starts in a row, really rebounded nicely last week as Norfolk took on a very good Lehigh Valley team. Bronovich was effective in game 2 of a doubleheader on Thursday, delivering 5 shutout innings, just 4 strikeouts against 2 walks, while scattering just 2 hits and picking up the win. Bronovich this season has been a little bit of a renaissance. The stuff has looked much better, and in his first full year, or his second full year back from Tommy John surgery, it has been good to see him pitching, and it's why we mentioned last week that he's a candidate to get big league innings before the season is out, and more performances like the one he had last week are going to get him to the big leagues at some point.
Yeah, I still think he is a very viable major league reliever, especially with the stuff increase that he's shown this year. But just back to Delmarva real quick. They've been more fun and watchable. Obviously, it's been 2 months now, but a lot of these guys that we didn't think much of have performed. Like we shouted out Raylan Ramos a lot recently, but he's up to 266 batting average, 731 OPS. Braylon Tavera having like a mini breakout, at least by his standards, compared to last year. Kevin Guerrero, Luis Guevara just skipping the FCL. Ellis Cuevas is back. Colin Tuft is back. And meanwhile, Aberdeen is like mostly disappointments other than Aaron Estrada, who, by the way, batted 312 with an 886 OPS in May. He continues to get better as seasons go on in his career.
Aberdeen is the most frustrating team. And as far as the four affiliates go, for sure. But yeah, with Branovich, I do agree. And I mentioned that on the weekly wrap-up episode this morning for patrons. Kind of like, I don't see him being a starter in the major leagues at this point because that command has kind of regressed post-surgery. But the fastball, I do think, is now livable. It could live in the major leagues, and he's got the funk, he's got the deception, he's got the breaking stuff. I think he could give you a little bit of a different look. I think he can survive for an inning or so in the major league a couple times a week. And yeah, hopefully he gets that shot, because it has been a wild career for Branovich, considering COVID and surgeries and everything. It took him, he was like 23 before he made his pro debut because of all of that. So good to see him back and healthy and improved and riding the ship here after, like you mentioned, he had a rough 2 weeks there.
Absolutely. And that does it for this episode. We will be back later on this week to profile our breakout pitching prospects. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community today. You can join at the $3, $5, or $10 levels and have access to bonus weekly coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list. In fact, we're going to be dropping our June update this week. So if you're a member of our Patreon community, you have that to look forward to. And if you're not a member yet, sign up now and have access to that and so much more. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we're back on this episode to continue profiling the breakout players over the first 2 months of the season in the Orioles farm system. Earlier this week, we took a look at some of the hitters that have gotten off to hot starts and really boosted their prospect stocks. In this episode, we're going to shift gears and talk about pitching. Now, I'm just going to get this out of the way, which is that there is a very, very obvious breakout candidate in the Orioles farm system, and that is Braxton Bragg. And in fact, when we were putting this episode together leading up to recording, we just decided that Braxton Bragg was a singular presence in this episode who was going to get his own discussion before we got into our individual breakout candidates, because too obvious of a choice, and not to mention that there's other guys we want to get to and give them their due, but we got to talk about Bragg and what he has done so far this year between Aberdeen and Chesapeake. 51 innings now, has a 1.24 ERA to go to 2.17 FIP, 2.69 xFIP, a 49.1% ground ball rate, and he has struck out 67 batters while walking just 16. Those 67 strikeouts, by the way, are tied with Trey Gibson for the organization lead. Bragg was very good at Delmarva last year, especially in the second half of the season. He pitched the full year there, got to jump up to Aberdeen, and after a very dominant start, went to Chesapeake, where he's honestly been even better than he was at High A. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what could be ahead for Bragg before the season is out later on in this episode. But Nick, I'll start with you here. I don't know that I've seen a player, especially on the pitching side, in the years that we've been doing this show, have the spike from one season to the next the way that Bragg has had this year.
No, this it's wild. Like, maybe he's still in. Maybe he ends up as a reliever, right? Keith Law thinks so. Maybe he's like a back end starter. Who knows, right? It's still it's fun to dream of what he can become, but also understand like he still has a lot to prove. But I don't understand how he is not a bigger story, even just among the organization, like internally. I mean, internally, I'm sure they're all excited, hyping him up. But like, why is Orioles player development like not hyping this kid up? Like this is unbelievable what he's doing. This is an 8th-round pick out of Dallas Baptist who got $100,000 signing bonus, was forced to sit in Delmarva all year last year, and now he's putting up those incredible numbers you just rattled off there. And it's better. Like he's getting more ground balls than last year. The first strike percentage is up almost 10%. It's like 55%. Contact against him is down. Like coming out of college, it was a 3-pitch mix, 90-93 with the fastball. He was a reliever for 3 years at Nebraska before going to Dallas Baptist and becoming a dude, because that's what Dallas Baptist does. They create studs down there. But now it's 5 pitches with more ticks on the fastball. Like it's not bad for an organization that doesn't draft pitching and can't develop pitching. Like this is a pretty big story.
They have completely remade, and I'm going to give most of the credit to Bragg himself, just because he's doing the work. He's kept pretty much his command. It's dipped a little bit, but when you add this stuff and velocity and pitches, it's very impressive what he's been able to do. But him and organization together have completely remade a college reliever into, like, I'm going to do one spoiler for the top 50 update. He's number 4 overall on my personal list. I'm all the way bought in on Braxton Bragg. He is, to me, like, sky's the limit. And yeah, he's a pitcher, so who knows? Could get hurt, could disappoint once he gets to the AAA major league level. But to me, this is the most exciting rocket of a rise. We have liftoff here with Braxton Bragg, as Michael Ice would say, and I will quote him on that. He's, not to mention he's got a 33.5% strikeout rate to go with the 8% walk rate. But also he's a ground ball pitcher. He's getting about 50% ground balls. He doesn't get hit hard. Like, it's just, I think anything you want, you're getting it. Hitters are batting 165 off him this season. Even last year when he was in Delmarva all year and had a very good, where's his ERA? 3.36 ERA. Batters hit 241 against him. This year against high A and double A, 165. Why is he should be in AAA? Because he's 24 years old. He'll be 25 in October. Once the Orioles come back from behind and win the World Series this year, he'll be turning 25. So, yeah, get him up to AAA. Get him in the majors by the end of this year, because I think he's going to be a real stabilizing force for this pitching staff, whether it's starter, reliever. To begin the year, at some point in 2026, Braxton Bragg is going to charge, lead the cavalry into the bounce back season.
Here, to that last point, somebody did ask about Braxton Bragg in Eric Longenhagen's chat. Basically, like where is he gonna go from here? So someone else asking what Zach asked there, and I think Eric's response was, if the Orioles are in contention, you bring him up, but if they're not in contention, then I think he said like just leave him down, maybe like in AAA and wait till next year. I don't know how I feel about that, but I don't know if you guys would agree or disagree with that. But I think the fact that if Eric's going to say, no, just maybe keep him away from that mess up there right now, leave him down in AAA, maybe it's because he's a little bit bullish. But I don't know. I don't know which way I lean towards that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe you want to save that 40-man roster spot for now. I would understand that. Have him just come in the spring to compete for a role. But at the same time, it would be kind of nice to reward him for the season he's had and reward the fans to give us some hope after suffering through at least the first 2 months of the season.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Bob in that I think that if you're looking to bring someone up to the minors, you're going to try to chip away at this crowded Rule 5 class a little bit, which is why I could kind of see Cameron Weston being the late season reinforcement over Bragg right now. But one thing I want to point out with Bragg is that his trajectory to this point, as far as health and development are concerned, is fairly linear. He had 96 innings last year. You mentioned, Nick, that he had started the year before at Dallas Baptist. So maybe you don't have some of the restrictions that you might have. Nestor Herman missed a little bit of time last year. Trey Gibson didn't pitch at all in 2023. And if you go back to last year, I think part of the reason that the Orioles didn't bring Brandon Young up in September, like a lot of us thought that they might, was because it was his first full year back from Tommy John surgery. You don't have those concerns with Bragg, and it doesn't mean you just cut him loose entirely, but it does mean that, as long as he stays healthy and you diligently manage his innings in season, maybe you could stretch him out in September if you had to.
It's a good point, actually, because they've already taken the training wheels off of him. Like, I don't know if it's like they're starting to do a little bit of changing philosophy as the development coming up, but typically you have 75, maybe 80 pitches max until you get to AAA. Well, he's broken that multiple times, had 91 pitches at some point, 80 some, like it was like 87, 88 his last time out. He's routinely going 6 into the 7th inning. So it's a good point.
And we'll dive in now to the rest of our breakout pitching prospects. And if you listened to our show earlier this week, you heard about 2 of these guys. And I'm going to start with Bob because he's profiling one of them.
Yeah, it's obvious when Trey Gibson, we talked about just the insane stuff that he has. He's striking out 15 and a half batters per 9, which equals 40.4% of batters, which what the hell? And he's only walking 8.4% in high A before. Very fascinated to see how he does in double A, because I think we've seen like some guys don't miss a beat and some guys kind of have some adjustments to be made once they make that jump. But, 5.12 ERA, but a 2.34 xFIP, 28% home run to fly ball ratio. But to me, I thought he was a breakout last year, going from an undrafted free agent in a 20-round draft to like, oh, okay, he's a top 30 prospect for us, one of our best pitching prospects in this legendary 2023 arms race that we have been involved with. But then this year, he's just put the pedal to the metal. And yeah, maybe it's because he is a little bit more fully in gear after missing a season and then getting his feet wet with 92 innings last year. He's already at 38.2 innings this year. So he's probably going to cross 100, 110 innings. And yeah, he's just letting it fly. He's letting it loose. And it seems like he's having fun out there. Honestly, he's just letting it eat. And he's doing plenty of that.
If the numbers he put up last year were what he's doing as he's ramping up, and I think I don't know who came out and said it directly, but like that was the goal last year with Trey Gibson, because he missed that full year, was just building him back up. Like he took off right from the start. And so here's something that was written about Trey Gibson right at the end of last season. So this is from Baseball America. Fastball sits in the mid-90s with plus whiff rates, more than 40% whiff rate on both the curveball and slider. Slider gets more than a foot of sweep, average cutter, below average change, but 3 above average offerings, 1 plus offering with 7 feet of extension, which is huge. Shared that article last year, and someone from the organization responded and said they're underselling this guy. And like maybe take that with a grain of salt. Of course, the Orcs going to hype up their own guys, but he's now a top 5 prospect in the system, according to Kylie McDaniel. That 30% strikeout rate is now a 40% strikeout rate. The 10% walk rate is down to 8%. Swinging strike rate is up to over 16%. Contacts down. And I think one of the bigger knocks on him was that he didn't throw enough strikes last year. And that he's jumped that from 63% to 68% end zone rate. So that's impressive. Like first strike percentage, fantastic. 46 to up to 52% now, first strike. So he's getting ahead early and finishing guys off pretty quickly. Like this is, now we wait and see what he can do in double A. Big test coming up. But when he's showing notable improvements in areas that were kind of the knock on him, like that's a great way to jump into double A action.
He has mastered the art of dropping in that slider, the breaking ball right at the top of the zone, catching the top of the zone where the guys clearly think it's going to be high, and then boom, it's right there. And then combining that with a hoppy 4-seamer that they can swing right through. It's a really, really nice balance he's got.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out with his strikeout numbers, he's tied with Braxton Bragg for the organization lead. That's despite the fact that he's thrown 13 fewer innings than Bragg so far this year. They have the same number of strikeouts. Braxton Bragg's having this great season, and he's thrown way more innings than Trey Gibson has, yet Gibson has matched him in strikeouts, which to me is really impressive.
I'm
Dean
telling you,
Kramer-esque.
I'm telling you that one of those early starts of the year when they were up, I don't know, it was Brooklyn, maybe, I don't know where, but it was cold, it was rainy, and I'm telling you, the look on his face was just this shit-eating grin of like, I'm up here throwing 90. He was like 90, 91. I'm like, where's his velo? Because he can hum it into the upper 90s. He was going like 80% in this outing, and he knew it. The catcher knew it. They're having fun back and forth. Turns out weather warmed up. He warms up a little bit, and now look at the numbers that he's putting up. I think that kind of confirms, in my opinion, that he was holding back a lot at the beginning of the year. You unleash him like this. He's just a bulldog. He's a massive human being out there on the mound. This is a big guy. And if he's getting 7 feet of extension and can throw it 95, 96, 97 miles an hour with unbelievable under the hood characteristics, like that's why I'm saying I don't think people understand how good Trey Gibson's stuff is. And this is the ultimate find. And the Orioles were in on him coming into the draft. But like, why take him? If you think he's gonna fall, like let him fall out of the draft as he did, and then pick him up. Like, good job. Good find.
Go over to the next pitcher now, because this is someone that has also been generating a lot of buzz down in AA.
Yeah, everybody, if you wanted Nathan Eovaldi this offseason, you got him here. I didn't read the article because I don't read the Baltimore Sun, but apparently he went to Nathan Eovaldi and got help with the changeup and some pitches or something. But Levi Wells, like the shoulder issue is behind him. Clearly that he suffered last year. He's added a couple of ticks to the fastball since joining the organization. He's had a full healthy offseason to work on strike throwing and command with that new velo. And he's went from like 93, 94 in college to now 96, 98. He's throwing more strikes. He looks fantastic. Got the walk rate down to 6%. That's the big key. And we kind of hinted that was going to kind of coming. If you looked at his numbers post injury last year, the walk rate was significantly better and trending in a much better direction. There was, the piece after the draft that highlighted, again, shout out Jeff Ponce, highlighted Levi Wells as someone who could reach the majors very quickly because of the massive stuff, but he had worrisome control. Put him in a relief role, let the stuff eat. But something else that I know others have commented on in the past that maybe pointed to Wells' future home being in relief was the delivery. It was like a little more violent, a little bit more max effort, not as repeatable, a little bit of a head whack there. I think even so much as like hat falling off of this thing. And so like those are kind of early signs that portend to like that's maybe a reliever profile, right? If he's going max effort, he's got the head whack, but he's increasing the velo, and I think he looks much more in control and smooth and polished out there with his delivery. Like I think that speaks volumes, and you're seeing the results follow in AA. Strikeouts aren't there. We'll see if they come later on, but I just feel like last year, go back to Trace Bright, right? We were hoping like he started throwing more strikes and guys were hitting him around a little bit more when he was in AA, but the walks were coming down. Everything else was looking good with Trace Bright until the wheels inevitably fell off again with him. With Wells, yeah, the strikeouts are down a little bit, but everything else across the board is improving. And so I think he's setting himself up pretty well. I'm excited to see what he can do over the second half of the season, see if he can get those strikeouts up. But this is a guy that I have loved from the start. I loved watching him in college, and I love him finding success at the AA level this year, especially after last year's kind of bumpy ride.
I would like to address the Keith Law report that came out recently about Levi Wells, because he starts off by saying he's sitting 97, 98 and touching 102, which is, wow, that's amazing. And then saying, yeah, but he can't strike anybody out because the fastball is straight, doesn't get any whiffs. The breaking stuff doesn't get any whiffs. Maybe the changeup could be something. I just have to completely disagree with the Law here. I think, yeah, maybe Wells doesn't have the hoppiest fastball of the guys that we talk about at the top end of the pitching prospects, but when you're throwing it 100 miles per hour, I don't think it matters quite as much. And we know he can strike guys out. He struck out 26% of batters last year, and it was a terrible season where he had a 6.71 ERA. And we talked about he was very unlucky, but I just could not. I cannot stand the way Keith Law goes about things. He sees guys in person one time and then makes his entire judgment for the rest of their careers based on that. But anyway, it's nice to note that Levi Wells is also a ground ball pitcher as well, with close to 50% ground ball rate to go along with the stuff. And I think he's doing the classic thing that we see a lot of times with Orioles pitchers once they get to AA, where strikeout rate falls, but so does the walk rate. It's clearly a mentality, clearly a directive. We're looking for strikes when we get to AA, where we're finding the command. And then at a certain point, when you get to AAA, put it all together, let it eat. So with the stuff that he has, I am very confident that the strikeouts will reappear, and he does have swing and miss stuff. But yeah, Levi Wells, man, what a beast. I hope he stays healthy, and I hope we get to see him. Whether I don't care if it is a reliever, he has closer stuff if he's a reliever, and if not, the starting pitcher that can go out there and touch 100 miles per hour. That's pretty exciting too.
Completely agree, Bob. And I remember coming into this year, we had tabbed Wells as a guy that we had on our radars because you factor in the injuries, the time missed last year, and some of the underlying metrics behind this season. And it seemed like he could get better this year. And I think I said on an episode leading up to the season that I thought the Wells stock was going to go up this year, but that would likely be solidified. He's going to be a reliever. And that may very well be the case. But one thing I feel like he's doing a very good job of, even if he does have to trade off the strikeouts a little bit, he seems to be getting more efficient as the season goes on. And that's really going to be key to him sticking in the rotation because the pitch mix is there. He does have a starter's mix, but can he locate those pitches consistently enough to get through a lineup 3 times? Up until this year, I would have said no. Now I'm starting to think, well, there is a little bit of a path here. I agree that, you want to see the strikeouts start to tick up, but if the strikeouts are coming down, the walks are coming down, that's very positive to me. So just continue for him. I just think it's a matter of continuing to do what he's doing so far, and the strikeouts eventually are going to come around.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I can't wait till all these great pitching prospects are in AAA where we get our hands on some data. But if his fastball is not the hoppiest, I think that's just a guy that you teach a sinker to, or a 2-seamer or a cutter or something to multi-fastball. I feel like that's all the rave right now to combat less hoppy 4-seamers is to just have multiple fastballs so that you can't get locked into one dead zone.
And I think just because the injury kind of wiped out that first year, like this year, I agree. It's throw strikes, throw your best stuff, and then we'll tinker from there, right? Because even with the bum shoulder last year, remember that talk about guys with just pure stuff, bringing them into the organization and then molding them into what you want them to become or what works best. Among all 23-year-olds in minor league baseball last year, Levi Wells had the 3rd best stuff plus in the entire league. So like it truly is fantastic stuff, and he's showcasing it. So I don't know what Keith Law looking at the 1940 models or something. I don't know. We'll move on to the next guy before I go on my Keith Law rant, which will probably get us pulled off the air.
I'll go into my guy, and that's Sebastian Gongora, who was just promoted from Delmarva to Aberdeen. And I think this is yet another example of not reading too much into college ERAs, because the Orioles took Gongora in last year's draft out of Louisville in the 11th round. Gongora had been at Wright State for 2 years before transferring to Louisville for the 2024 season. He'd been effective out of Wright State's rotation and went to Louisville, and the strikeouts went up while the walks held steady, but he posted a 6.14 ERA. We got a small taste of him last year at Aberdeen, 1 appearance before he went to Delmarva to begin this season. The one thing with Gongora that has jumped out is how much better he has gotten as the year went on. We talked about this a little bit on our last show, but Gongora departed Delmarva with 14 walks and 22 1/3 innings pitched. What's worth noting is that almost half of those walks came within his first 2 starts. And over the month of May, he had 5 starts, posting a 2.45 ERA with a 21-6 strikeout to walk rate. And the one thing that Gongora has been able to do this year is sustain the velo increase that we saw last year at Louisville. He's primarily sitting 90 to 94 there. And then, as Eric Longhagen noted on Fangraphs earlier this year, in his first outing of this season, he was riding 93 to 95 and touched 96 with the fastball. He's generally been in the low 90s, low to mid 90s in his starts. He can bump the fastball up to the mid 90s. So there's definite, I think, at least reliever profile with Gongora, and possibly a starter if the Orioles can round out the breaking stuff, which at points this year has looked excellent.
Yeah, that's my big thing with Gongora, is that he's one of those guys who you obviously keep him on a starter's track right now. He's made just a couple of appearances as a pro, but if you're able to throw 97 from the left side, I like the kind of reliever floor there with him. If anything else, we'll see. His dad was a pitcher drafted by the Braves. He's got it in his blood for whatever that is worth, but he's become a swing and miss artist down there in low A. He was one of the top swing and miss guys in, what is it, South Atlanta League, Carolina League? I don't know. They all got moved and switched. Who cares? But among just Orioles pitchers, Gongora has the second highest swinging strike rate at 16.8%. You know who's first? A guy who has no business being a Double-A, Keegan Gillis, at almost 20%. But just among low A, it's the Carolina League, is Delmarva. But just among the Carolina League pitchers, Gongora was top 10 in swinging strike rate and strikeout rate by the time of his promotion. Yeah, and I'm excited to see what he can do in high A. Now that he's clearly kind of settled in, they got him stretched out a little bit more. I'm excited to see what he can do in high A, because if you look at Aberdeen, I know we just kind of ragged on the lineup and how it's not been fun to watch this year just because of all the high-profile prospects there who just aren't performing, hopefully, yet. Aberdeen has a new pitching coach this year in Jeremy Heilman, who, when he got hired, we talked about him on the podcast, and I highlighted the fact that when he went to St. Joe's, where the Orioles pulled him from, the strikeout rate increased dramatically. When he went to Army before that, the strikeout rate at Army increased dramatically. Wherever Jeremy Heilman goes, the strikeouts come with him. And I think Aberdeen has like 5 guys in the top 20 in strikeout rate or swinging strike rate or combined. And if Gongora was already doing that at the low A level and now he's stretched out and feeling more settled in, I'm pretty pumped to see what he can do the rest of this year in high A.
Yeah, Gongora went from a guy that was like, a curious arm, want to keep track of coming into the season, but now he's like, I want to watch every start that he makes, because his changeup alone. Let's just remember that changeup when we go through the rating the best pitches and stuff like that.
Carlos Tavera is still alive.
That's true. That's true. We think, but but between the fastball and the changeup alone, yeah, you're talking major league reliever right there. But if they can, I don't know, work on the command of the breaking stuff or tinker around, we know he's going to probably continue to get better over off seasons, during seasons. That's just how these Orioles pitchers tend to operate. Very exciting, high ceiling, left-handed arm. Yeah, I think he has a potential to be a mid-rotation starter if everything breaks right. It's incredibly early, but I think the floor is pretty solid as a relief prospect between the fastball and changeup.
Well, and he's delivering it too from that short, kind of quick arm slot that he has, and I think that's making it really tough for hitters to pick up on.
Yeah, I think you see that someone else much smarter than me that can dive into this and discuss it better. You've seen this with a couple of other guys too, and they get picked up by a national writer, national analyst. He's a taller guy, a bigger guy. And if he's also coming from that lower slot, and we don't have spin what the induced vertical break is. I think we have I found 4 innings of StatCast data in college. I don't care what that's old at this point. It's like 2 years old. He could be kind of one of these fun guys where he's maybe not a top 30 on some list, but he's going to be in the 10 more guys you need to know, or he's going to be maybe next year on the very back end of Eric Longenhagen's list at Fangraphs. And it's going to be like, there's some outlier traits here that make him kind of interesting. Let's see what he can do this year. I kind of feel like that's the path he's heading down.
Yeah, we have some smart patrons. Maybe we need to bring one of them on at some point, like Tommy Carr or Elijah. Shout out the Warehouse Pod. These guys seem to be able to break down these pitching plots better than at least I know I can. I'm still trying to learn it, but yeah, I'm fascinated to watch and read people break that stuff down. So yeah, Gongora definitely seems like he's got traits that make him unique. That's for sure.
And speaking of patrons and regular listeners, we want to go to a question here from Vivek, who during the live broadcast brought this up. Who are the top 5 pitching prospects by year's end in the Orioles system? So I'm sure that we'll probably have an opportunity to predict this again before the season is out. But do you guys have any thoughts on this as we sit here in early June?
I do. I love this question because I think it's really tough. And who knows, maybe there will be some outlier that we don't know about. But I think it's more about the order for me. I'm going to go ahead and assume that Brandon Young and Chase McDermott reach their eligibility window and are no longer considered prospects just for the sake of the exercise. Maybe one or both will still be eligible. But the 5 for me are cemented in my brain at this point. I definitely see room where if some people get healthy, they can move up. But the order is interesting. I will go Braxton Bragg, number 1. I will go Trey Gibson, number 2. Michael Ferret, number 3. Please get healthy. Nestor Erman, number 4. And Levi Wells, number 5.
I'm going Trey Gibson 1. Bragg 2. Ferret 3. That's really 2A and 2B. Herman 4. And you know what? I just hyped up Levi Wells. I will push the Levi Wells agenda every chance I get. But you know who I'm super pumped about, and he's been looking good since coming back. And I'm hoping if we were to do this episode again in 2 months, he would be the guy we start the show with at the top of, yeah, this is the gimme. I'm going to be hopeful and say Luis De Leon takes the big jump over the second half of the season now that he's fully healthy back in Aberdeen.
Yeah, I could see him. I could see Zach Fruit if he comes back. Yeah, there's Cameron Weston if he could just continue to take off from where he's at. So
if Patrick Riley doesn't have TJ, where does he rank?
Yeah, he's up there for sure.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I think if Ferret is healthy, he is number 1. I've said before that I think he has the highest ceiling just because of his stuff and because of his age. So I'll say that this injury, he bounces back from quickly and we see him. And then for me, it's kind of 2A, 2B from here, but breaking it down as 2, 3, 4, I would go Gibson, Bragg, then Herman. I will go with Levi Wells 5, but I'll tack on another breakout candidate to Nick's Luis De Leon. Keep an eye on Esteban Mejia. He has looked excellent in the FCL early on this year, and there's some killer Morphe traits there, and we know that Morphe was not good at all before he went on the IL earlier this year. But 2 things with Mejia to note: the command has been a little bit better than it was for Morphe early in his career, and he's got more of a prototypical starter's build. So really keep an eye on Esteban Mejia. I think it's a dark horse option to be in the top 5, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Also wouldn't rule out Keeler Morphe coming back with a vengeance in the second half. If they've been working with him behind the scenes with this phantom finger injury, and no, I'm sure it's a real injury, but don't give up hope on Morphe just because he had a couple bad starts to begin the year.
Absolutely. And with that, now we'll head into our final segment. Last call brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing. Located at 1421 Ridgely Street, Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink. And although the Orioles are on the road this week, when they come back into town, be sure to check out the beer stand behind home plate where you can get one of Checker Spot's signature beers, The Bird is a Word. And while you wait for the Orioles to come back, head in there this week, get some carry-out, go home for the West Coast games. Not to mention, too, that Checker Spot is coming up on its 7th anniversary. So congratulations to them. That will be in the middle of this month, and I'll give it another plug before their event on June 14th. But I will now go into our last call question for this episode, which is this. Aside from organizational type moves, so in other words, a guy gets bumped up from AA to AAA to start the second game of a doubleheader or filling in the bullpen for a couple of weeks before being sent back down. Will we see a pitcher who started the season in high A and this year in triple A? If so, who it will be? Now, for some historical context, this has happened a lot with hitters in the Mike Elias era, but not so much with pitchers. Yet, it feels like 2025 is finally going to be the year that we see a pitcher go from high A to triple A in a season. Would you agree with that, Nick?
We're not including Braxton Bragg in this, I'm assuming.
Oh, no, he's eligible.
So, yeah, I mean, Braxton Bragg will be there for sure. I don't know. Maybe unless Gibson comes out like just shoving when he starts pitching in double A. I don't know. Just because I could see like Keaton Gillis finally gets the bump. Levi Wells gets the bump if he keeps pitching as well as he has. And then like Norfolk fills the rest of the innings with, Peter Van Loon back up. Ryan Long gets back up. They trade for some arms at the deadline. That pushes guys back down. If I'm betting on it, I'm going to say, other than Braxton Bragg, no. But yeah, Bragg will get there.
I'm going to go the other direction and say, well, Bragg by the end of the month. I'm also going to say, rough start for Nestor Herman. I don't think Norberth Romero playing right field helped him at all in that game. But I'm going to say Herman and Gibson also get at least that last week or two taste of AAA to end the year. Maybe because if the Orioles are selling, and I think our guy Vivek thinks they're going to make like 8 or 9 trades, I could see that they're going to need to pull guys from AAA to help out the majors. And then maybe that's when you get a little taste for the guys like Pham. Hopefully he's back and healthy. Fruit, Wells, Herman, and Gibson. Yeah. So I'll say 3 at the end of the day, but definitely Bragg.
Yeah, I think Bragg definitely gets there. I'm going to probably go with Nick on this one because I do feel like there are a lot of arms still at Chesapeake who deserve some run in Norfolk. Levi Wells is probably going to get there at some point. Keegan Gillis should have been there at the start of this year. Honestly, I don't know why he's still in AA. And I really want Peter Van Loon to get an extended run in AAA before this season is over. He has nothing left to prove in AA. I don't see the point in bouncing him back and forth the way that they have. I'd put him in AAA, even if it's out of the bullpen, just to see what he can do. Now, with that said, I do think that if you see Gibson and Herman there this year, it will be like what Bob brought up, kind of a late season cameo, maybe a start or two for them to get their feet wet in anticipation of them going there in 2026. But for now, I'll just stick with Bragg.
We need guys like Corbin Martin, who else? Nick Richmond. These guys, Thaddeus Ward, Grant Wolfram, these guys need to be in AAA. Sorry, Luis Castillo, F. Castillo, Raul Alcantara. These are essential to the AAA experience.
Of course, yeah, clearly. But yeah, it's just hard because I think even if some of these guys deserve it, just because who from the FCL, I don't think you're going to see a ton of pitchers probably move up to Delmarva maybe. And even if they draft a bunch of pitchers, which they do every year, a lot of those arms, they're just going to shut them down. They're not going to see time. So it's unless more guys come back healthy, if Fruit can come back, if Pham can come back, if more of these guys can come back healthy, then maybe that helps. I don't know. I don't see the arms from the lower levels being able to kind of fill the gaps if we keep moving arms up. And I that's why I just see the Orioles kind of playing it safer there. But prove me wrong. Send all these guys to AAA. Like I said last week, let's be aggressive with these promotions.
And with that, that does it for our coverage this week. We will be back next week to break down the latest news in Birdland. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. Not only do we have coverage of the Orioles minor leagues there, but also a ton of draft content that Nick has been putting out on a weekly basis, so you don't want to miss that. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels. You'll have access to bonus weekly coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list. In fact, our top 50 for the month of June dropped this week. So if you're not a member of our Patreon community yet, you can sign up now as a paying member and have access to that and a whole lot more. And if you are a member of our Patreon community, be sure to check out that episode if you haven't already. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.